Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really powerful argument, one that might just challenge everything you think you know about the history of capitalism. We're going to break down some source material that uncovers a pretty hidden connection, the one between capitalism and slavery. So, let's just jump right into the big provocative question here. What if capitalism didn't actually replace slavery? What if it was built by it? I mean, the whole argument we're looking at today is that these two systems are completely inseparable. And if that's true, well, it pretty much flips the script on the standard history we all learned.
All right, first things first. Let's tackle what the source calls a foundational myth about how these two systems even relate to each other.
You know, the common story we all hear kind of puts slavery and capitalism in two different boxes, right? Slavery was this ancient, brutal thing, and then capitalism came along as this modern, free system. But the source material we're looking at says, nope, that's fundamentally wrong. It argues that slave plantations weren't some backward relic from the past. Far from it. They were highly modern, incredibly efficient, and honestly some of the most profitable capitalist businesses on the planet at the time.
And I mean, just think about the sheer scale of this operation. We're not just talking about farming. These were global commodities: sugar, coffee, cotton, tobacco, all produced on an industrial scale by enslaved people. And all that immense wealth, it didn't just disappear. It flowed right back to Europe and the Americas, directly fueling the engine of the Industrial Revolution and the rise of capitalism as we know it.
Okay, so that raises a huge question, right? If slavery was so incredibly profitable for this new capitalist system, why on earth did it end? And this brings us to the second major myth that the source material really wants to challenge.
The source really leans on the work of the legendary W.E.B. Du Bois. He argued that emancipation wasn't some gift that was just handed down from on high. No, it was won. It was fought for by enslaved people themselves through their own resistance.
And when you look at the history, it totally backs this up. I'm talking about the Haitian Revolution, which created the world's very first independent Black republic, or the massive strike of 30,000 enslaved people in Jamaica. And then, during the U.S. Civil War, 500,000 people basically freed themselves by walking off plantations and joining the Union lines. Time and time again, the single most powerful force pushing against slavery was the organized resistance of the enslaved.
So the big takeaway here, according to this argument, is that leaders like Abraham Lincoln, well, they didn't really lead this change. They were forced to catch up to a reality that was already being created on the ground by enslaved people who were taking their own freedom. They forced his hand, pushing him to move way further and faster than he ever planned. And this leads us to another really critical point the source makes. The problem wasn't just about a few bad people. It was about the economic system itself.
You know, it's really easy to fall into what you might call the bad apple theory, blaming a few evil, sadistic slave masters and saying the system was otherwise okay. But the source argues we need to look at the rotten barrel reality. The idea here is that the system of competitive capitalism itself is deeply flawed. It actually rewards exploitation and practically forces people, even maybe some well-intentioned ones, into oppressive roles just to stay in business.
Let's just play this out with a little thought experiment. Imagine a shoe factory owner who decides, I'm going to be a great boss. So he doubles wages, he cuts working hours. Sounds amazing, right? A real moral victory. But what happens next? His costs skyrocket. He has to raise his prices to cover them. And that competitor down the street, the one who's still exploiting their workers, they swoop in, undercut his prices, and seize his market share. The result? Our benevolent owner goes bankrupt. The system itself rewards the exploiter and punishes the one who tried to do the right thing.
So, okay, how does this history of chains and whips and overt compulsion connect to our world of paychecks and office jobs? Well, the source draws a direct and pretty powerful line.
The whole mechanism of compulsion has just evolved. It's shifted. It's gone from the very direct, very political force of a master's whip forcing you to work to the much more impersonal economic force of the market. Now it's the need to pay your rent, the need to buy groceries, the need to get healthcare that forces you to work for someone else's profit. The compulsion is still there, it just looks different. And there's a name for this concept: market dependence. It's that state where, basically, to survive, you have no real choice but to sell your ability to work for a wage. It's the invisible force that keeps the modern economy running.
And according to the source material, political policies like austerity are actually designed to make this dependence even stronger. The argument is that it's not really about saving money. It's a political tool to shift resources.
So, for example, you see budget proposals that slash hundreds of billions from social safety nets, things like Medicaid and food assistance, while at the very same time, defense spending goes up. The goal, from this perspective, is to strip away any alternatives, making people even more dependent on that wage to survive.
So wow, if the system is that powerful, what's the lesson we're supposed to take from all this hidden history? The source points to one really powerful answer.
And it comes back to this idea from David McNally. Solidarity is the greatest antidote to fear in the world. Just like enslaved people had to organize together to challenge an entire economic system, the source concludes that building that same kind of solidarity is the key to challenging oppressive systems today.
Look, the ultimate argument here is that the system works by dividing people, by conquering them through that division. So the antidote, then and now, is solidarity, community, and struggle. The big lesson from this history is that when ordinary people get together and act together, they can literally change the world, because they've already done it before.
And that brings us right back to today, leaving us with a pretty critical question to think about. This history isn't just something in a textbook. It offers a powerful lens to see our own world. So if the source is right, and history is really shaped from the bottom up by the actions of ordinary people, where do you see that happening today?